one, Mr. John Garrett.
Mr. Speaker, sir, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall be having further meetings later today. This evening I hope to have an audience of Her Majesty the Queen.
The Prime Minister has now had 20 major ministerial reshuffles during her reign.
Keep going,
As a result, 115 ministers and whips have been sacked or disposed of. By and large, what was wrong with them?
Mr. Speaker, we've got a lot of good talent on these benches waiting to come in. My second and third team could knock the top team opposite into a cocked hat.
Once upon a time, can my right honourable friend believe that only half of my constituents paid anything for their services? The other half were totally subsidised. Can you imagine going back to the bad old days and explain to my constituents what a rating revaluation would mean and the removal of a spending assessment whereby my people had a guideline on what they should be spending and therefore no accountability whatsoever?
Mr. Speaker, to go back to rates is indeed a step backwards over the most unpopular tax we've ever had and unfair and totally unfair. A tax which permits something like 35 or 36 million people to vote for local authorities and only taxes half of them is totally unfair, unaccountable, and I understand that opposite that they are totally against capping local authority expenditure. That will mean higher rates, higher local authority spending and higher taxation all round.
Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister confirm that she's willing, even eager, to sell off Power Gen at a knockdown price to Lord Hansard, another friend of the family?
Mr. Speaker, as my right honourable friend indicated yesterday, the government has a duty to get the best deal for the taxpayer. Very good, best deal for the taxpayer. The right honourable gentleman takes his customary swipe at private enterprise. He can't stand it. He'd far rather have nationalisation run by politicians who know nothing.
Mr. Speaker, there's private enterprise and there's looking after your friends. I think that the country can distinguish between the two. How can anyone who's selling off the electricity industry, who's selling off the electricity industry, Mr. Speaker, how can anyone who's selling off the electricity industry say that they're trying to get a good deal for the country in any case? Most of all, how can anyone selling off that industry at a third of its value say they're getting good value for the country? Whatever happened to the undertaking given by the Secretary of State for Energy that no one, neither organisation nor individual, would ever be allowed to own more than 15% of the companies?
Mr. Speaker, Power Gen will be sold off at the highest price. My right honourable friend has an indicative price. Other bids will be asked for. Is he against selling it off at the highest price? Or does he allow his prejudices against private enterprise to dictate his every sentence?
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister can twist and turn all she likes. The truth is that in breach of the promises that she has already made, she is selling off at a fraction of its value a highly profitable company to a bosom chum and a major contributor to the Conservative Party. Isn't it obvious? Isn't it obvious that this session is ending as it began, with sleaze and shadiness at the heart of the government?
No, Mr. Speaker.
Order. Prime Minister.
In one respect, Mr. Speaker, the session is ending as it began, with the right honourable gentleman not listening to any reply and going on with a supplementary he'd worked out before the reply. My right honourable friend indicated that he will maximize the price, and he's duty-bound to maximize the price to get the best value for the taxpayer, that other bids will be asked for. If the right honourable gentleman thinks it's being sold at a knockdown price, why don't he and some of his trade union friends put forward a consortium to bid at a higher price? No, because he's talking nonsense as usual.
Order! Order! Let's settle down. Sir Gerald Howard.
Mr. Speaker, since this is the last Prime Minister's question time before the 50th anniversary of the Battle of Britain is celebrated in September, would my right honourable friend take this opportunity of paying her tribute to the heroism of the few, to assure those 1,000 or so who remain that they are not forgotten, and would she join with me in commending to the British public the Reach for the Sky appeal to raise £20 million so that those who so valiantly fought for the freedom which we all in this House take for granted today will not be forgotten?
I'm sure all parts of the House will gladly respond to my honourable friend's invitation. We shall never forget and can never repay the debt of gratitude we owe, in particular to those pilots, as to other people who lost their lives during the last World War. And I hope people will respond gladly to that particular appeal.
To Ashdown.
Did the Prime Minister notice that yesterday her Chancellor said that the alternative to his plan was a two-speed Europe? Is that what the Prime Minister would prefer, rather than see Britain join a single currency and a central bank?
Mr. Speaker, I believe that the plan that we have put up can in fact gather support from all European countries. It will be the next stage, an effective next stage, to the Delors Stage 1. We all, I think, approve of Delors Stage 1, or at any rate most of us. We're prepared to have a Stage 2 which would unite people. Why is the right honourable gentleman constantly trying to divide them?
Mr. Tim Boswell.
My right honourable friend find time to commission a special inquiry into the administrative cost and duration of finding out a revaluation of every single house in this country in order to effect any return to the rating system? Or would she rather go on with 20 years figures out of date?
No, Mr. Speaker, I did at one time consider a rating revaluation, which had been a revaluation 17 years after the last one, but we'd had enough experience in Scotland of a domestic rating revaluation only 7 years after the previous one, that in fact resulted in a bigger proportion going to the domestic ratepayer and rates on the individual ratepayer which were totally and utterly intolerable as well as grossly unfair.
Mr. Alan Williams.
Could he try number 2, sir?
Some moments ago.
Oh, entirely my mistake. Number 2, Mr. Ron Davies.
Number 2.
I refer the honourable gentleman to the reply which I gave some moments ago.
Mr. Ron Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could the Prime Minister tell us whether there's any truth in the rumour that the honourable member for Acton, Ealing, is still a man of principle, that he hasn't sacrificed his beliefs for a little patronage, and that he's only been appointed to the Government Whip's office to mastermind the repeal of the poll tax?
My honourable friend, the member for Acton, shares those characteristics with every other person on this side of the House.
Mr. Peter Thurnham.
Would my right honourable friend give strong guidance to local authorities on their priorities for community care? Is he aware that the 64-year-old mother of my constituent, Paul Hargreaves, can't go on holiday tomorrow because Bolton Council say his disabilities are too severe for them to look after him? Doesn't this show that local authorities should get their act together before taking on more responsibility?
Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that we all sympathise with that family, and I know the particular attention my honourable friend pays to those with disabilities, and the amount of work he's done for them. I hope that he'll be able to get the mother a holiday, and I think we know that in... Yes, I do. And I think most of us, have in our experience in constituencies cases of that kind and know frequently that hospitals during August will take people in who are in need of a daily attention for a fortnight to permit the parents to go away.
Mr. Alan Williams.
Please, sir. The gentleman's reply which I gave some moments ago.
Mr. Williams.
As a chemist, and having been Prime Minister for 11 years, which environmental achievement would the Prime Minister like to be remembered by? The deterioration in Britain's beaches, the continued dumping of sewage sludge in the North Sea, the tenfold growth in the import of toxic wastes, the continuing increases in carbon dioxide emissions, Britain's exports of chlorofluorocarbons, or the fact
Well, order. Normally we have one question.
When this government leaves office, not a single one of our power stations will have been put in with desulfurization. Is it any surprise that Britain is regarded as the dirty man of Europe?
Well, Mr. Speaker, like many other people, I could scarcely hear what was said, except that I got the beaches and the water right at first. He asked me which we prefer to recall for. I would like to recall to the House that with regard to beaches, the European Community sent a directive in 1975 to the then Labour government. Requiring that all beaches not up to date or in accordance with the directive be identified and that something be done about them. The Labour government did absolutely nothing. It took a Tory government...
Order. Order. Well, order takes a lot of time to answer multiple questions.
The Labour government, I'm reminded by one of my right honourable friends, promptly cut capital expenditure on water. It took a Conservative government to come in and increase capital expenditure on water, to identify those beaches, to deal in fact with 3/4 of them in the first 11 years, and in the next few years to have a £3 billion investment programme to bring all of those beaches up to date. I would like to go on, Mr. Speaker, to answer the rest of the honourable member's question. I do have a whole lot of information here. Even a few, for example, achievements since the 1987 election, where the national debt has been reduced by £30,000 million.
Order. Well, order. Well, I already said that multiple questions take a lot of time to answer. 200,000 more businesses opened than closed. The top number of jobs in this country ever. The 1988 budget reduced basic income tax from 25 pence to 25 pence to 27, and higher rate taxes from maximum of 60 to 40, etc., 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 Mr. Barryfield!
Right, honourable friends, see the report in the Sunday Times that both the Roman Catholic and Anglican bishops of Liverpool had requested a meeting with our honourable friend, the Secretary of State for the Environment, because of the financial chaos into which Liverpool City Council's finances have been plunged as a result of the Liberal Democrats voting with militant tendency. Isn't that the worst case of political prostitution we have ever seen?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I accept what my honourable friend says. That shows precisely what happens when local government gets in the hands of Labour authorities and no overall control, and it shows precisely what would happen if socialism ever got in charge of Britain.
Mr. Dale Campbell Savers.
I refer the honourable gentleman's reply which I gave some moments ago.
Mr. Dale Campbell Savers.
As the Prime Minister was so keen to defend the right of Mr. Salmon Rushdie to publish his book Satanic Verses, can we have an assurance that you will be equally diligent and vigorous in defending the rights of Muslims who want to see the film distributed international guerrilla, particularly as Mr. Rushdie has said himself that no question of criminal libel arises? Or are we simply to have double standards?
Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman. The decision to refuse the Film International Guerrillas a certificate was taken by the British Board of Film Classification, who, having received legal advice that the recording might constitute a work of criminal libel, decided in accordance with normal practice that it would not be appropriate to issue a certificate. The board is an entirely independent body. If the distributors of the recording wish to appeal against the decision of the board, they may make application to the Video Appeals Committee in the usual way. This is what this House decided, and we cannot overturn it.